In the heart of a golden desert, where the winds carried songs of ancient times, there stood a majestic palace. Its domes shimmered under the sun. Its marble walls whispered of treasures and tales. Yet, within this palace lived a princess whose heart was far greater than any jewel locked inside the royal vaults. Her name was Jasmine, known by her people as the Desert Rose. Every morning, Jasmine would rise before the sun, climbing to the highest balcony of her chambers. From there, she could see the desert stretching endlessly, painted in shades of rose and gold. So much world beyond these walls, waiting for me. Her attendants adored her kindness, for Jasmine was not like the queens and princesses of other lands. She cared not for jewels or gowns, but for stories of the markets, for the laughter of children, and for the freedom she often dreamed of. What would it feel like? She mused one morning, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. To walk among the people without a crowd, without guards. The palace, though grand, felt like a golden cage. Its high gates, designed to protect her, often seemed to hold her spirit captive. The courtyards echoed with music. The fountains danced with silver water. Yet Jasmine's heart yearned for the unknown. One night, when the stars hung low and close to the desert sands, she pressed her hand against the cool marble wall of her room and whispered, "I don't just want to watch the world. I want to live it." And in that moment, the desert winds answered with a soft sigh, carrying with them a promise that Jasmine's destiny was far greater than the walls of her palace. The palace gates loomed tall and heavy, their iron patterns twisted into vines and flowers. To Jasmine, they were beautiful and suffocating. Behind them lay the bustling heart of the kingdom, the market, where life thrived in colors and voices she could only dream of. One morning, dressed not in silk, but in a simple robe borrowed from her handmaiden, Jasmine slipped past the guards. The air beyond the gates was unlike anything she had known, warm, alive, and brimming with stories. "So many people, so many voices," she whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. The market stretched endlessly, a sea of stalls lined with spices, silks, and trinkets. The scent of cinnamon and saffron mingled with the sweetness of fresh dates. Children darted between the crowds, laughing, their tiny sandals tapping against the cobblestones. Jasmine's lips curved into a smile as she passed a musician strumming an oud. "This is magical," she whispered, swaying softly to the tune. Everywhere she turned, she found something new. A woman bargaining for fabric, an old man telling tales of the desert spirits, a boy offering figs with a cheeky grin. For the first time, Jasmine felt like she wasn't a princess. She was simply a girl, a soul among souls, free and unbound. Yet, as she reached for a pomegranate on a merchant's cart, the stall-keeper frowned. "Careful, young lady," he said. "This isn't a palace. You must pay your way." Jasmine blinked, realizing she had never needed coins before. I didn't think of that." Before the merchant could question her further, a shadow moved at her side. A young traveler stepped forward, tossing a small silver coin onto the cart. His eyes sparkled as he looked at Jasmine, a half-smile playing on his lips. "The market can be tricky for strangers," he said. "You look like you could use a little help." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary traveler. His gaze carried both mischief and kindness, like the desert stars that twinkled with secrets. "Thank you," she murmured, lowering her eyes, though curiosity burned within her. The market bustled on, unaware that two destinies had just brushed against one another, like the first spark of a flame waiting to grow. As the day melted into twilight, the market's clamor softened into a gentle hum. Stalls began to close. Lanterns swayed from ropes above, casting golden circles of light on the cobbled streets. Jasmine lingered, her heart alive with the wonder of everything she had seen. But it wasn't just the colors, scents, and music that stayed with her. It was the traveler. She found him again near the fountain, where the water shimmered under the rising moon. He sat with ease, tossing a small coin in his hand, as though waiting. His eyes caught hers before she could turn away. "Lost again?" he teased, his voice warm like desert wind. Jasmine laughed softly, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Maybe I am," she admitted. "Or maybe I've just found something worth staying for." The traveler leaned closer, his voice lowering into a whisper. "And what would that be?" Jasmine hesitated. Should she tell him she was a princess? Number out here, under the lanterns and stars, she was only a girl, free, nameless, curious. "The stories," she replied instead. "The way the market sings when the sun sets. It feels alive." He smiled knowingly. "The desert is full of stories," he said, "but only for those willing to listen." They sat together as the night deepened, the stars unveiling themselves one by one. A breeze carried the scent of jasmine blossoms from a nearby stall, almost as if the universe itself whispered her name. Jasmine tilted her head back, gazing at the sky. "It feels endless," she whispered, "like the stars could carry me anywhere." The traveler's eyes softened as he studied her wonder. "Maybe they can," he murmured, "if you're brave enough to follow them." For a long while, silence wrapped around them, not heavy, but comforting, like a blanket of night. In that quiet, something gentle bloomed, fragile yet undeniable, a spark of connection. And though Jasmine didn't yet know his name, her heart whispered one truth. Her life had just changed forever. The palace gardens shimmered under the silver glow of the moon. Fountains whispered in gentle streams, and the roses seemed to bloom brighter at night, their petals catching starlight like jewels. Jasmine walked slowly, her heart still echoing with the words of the traveler. If only I could see him again, outside these walls." She trailed her fingers along the marble rail, the cool touch grounding her restless thoughts. The garden had always been her secret refuge, a place where the air smelled of jasmine blossoms and dreams felt close enough to touch. That night, as if summoned by her longing, she heard a faint rustle behind the ivy-covered gate. Her breath caught. "Who's there?" she whispered. A familiar voice answered, low and playful. "You really should be more careful, wandering alone at night." Her eyes widened. It was him, the traveler. Somehow, impossibly, he had found his way into the palace gardens. "How did you—" He pressed a finger to his lips, his eyes sparkling. "Shh. Some secrets are better kept between the stars." Jasmine laughed softly, a sound that mingled with the night breeze. "You're impossible." Together they walked through the moonlit paths. He showed her how the shadows of the trees painted shapes on the ground, like hidden stories waiting to be read. He plucked a fallen rose and offered it to her, bowing with mock formality. For the desert rose herself. She blushed, taking it with trembling fingers. "No one's ever called me that. Not like this." The traveler's gaze lingered on her, warm and steady. "That's because no one's truly seen you." Her heart fluttered wildly, the walls of her golden cage suddenly feeling less heavy. In the silence that followed, the garden seemed alive with magic, as though every leaf and flower leaned closer to listen. For the first time, Jasmine didn't feel like a princess trapped in duty. She felt like a girl who belonged to the stars, to the whispers of the desert, and maybe to him. The morning sun spilled over the desert dunes, painting them in soft gold and rose. Jasmine sat at the balcony of her chambers, her heart still fluttering from the secret garden meeting the night before. "I can't stop thinking about him. Who is he really?" The palace felt unusually quiet, the servants moving silently, as if even the walls were holding their breath. Jasmine knew she had to uncover the truth behind the mysterious traveler whose presence had stirred something deep within her. She slipped into the hidden corridors of the palace, tracing the secret passages that few knew existed. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying whispers of jasmine and the faint echo of ancient tales. "If only I could see beyond these walls." At the edge of the garden, she found him waiting, sitting beneath the moonlit rose arch. His eyes met hers, warm and teasing, as if he had been expecting her. "Curiosity suits you, Desert Rose," he whispered, his voice a melody in the quiet night. Jasmine stepped closer, heart racing. "I need to know. Who are you? Why do you appear in my life like a dream I can't touch?" "I am someone who, like you, longs to be free. Yet I am bound by promises and shadows. But when I am with you, the world feels lighter, the night feels endless, and even the impossible seems possible." "Bound? Shadows? What do you mean?" He took her hand gently, their fingers intertwining, and the stars above seemed to lean closer to hear the truth. "I cannot tell everything, not yet, but soon, when the desert sings to the moon, you will know who I am and why fate brought us together." Jasmine's chest swelled with emotion, fear, wonder, and a thrilling spark of hope. She realized that freedom was not just about leaving the palace, it was about discovering truths, facing shadows, and trusting her heart. "Then I will wait for the night when all secrets are revealed." And as the two of them sat under the rose arch, the desert wind carried their whispered promises into the vast night, a magic that would guide them through the trials yet to come. The palace, usually bright and serene, felt heavier that evening. The corridors echoed with the faint rustle of silk and the soft drip of water from the fountains, yet something darker lingered in the air. Jasmine sensed it even before she saw it. "Something isn't right," she murmured, her heart fluttering with unease. In the shadowed hall of the palace, a man cloaked in dark silks leaned over a golden map of the kingdom. His eyes glimmered with cunning and greed, plotting to take control of the desert lands and the treasures hidden within. The princess grows bold. I cannot allow her freedom to ruin my plans, he muttered, his fingers tapping impatiently on the mat. Meanwhile, Jasmine returned to the gardens, hoping the night air would calm her racing thoughts. Lanterns swayed gently in the wind, casting dancing shadows across the marble paths. But even the beauty of the moonlit roses could not erase the sense of danger creeping closer. Why do I feel like the walls are closing in, even outside my chambers? As she wandered, the traveler appeared silently beside her, as if summoned by her unease. His eyes reflected concern and determination. The palace hides more than just walls, Jasmine. Someone watches, and their heart is not kind. Jasmine's hand found his, and together they walked under the moonlight, feeling the tension tighten like a coil around the kingdom. Yet, even in the presence of looming danger, a spark of courage glimmered within her. Then let them watch, she whispered, tightening her grip on his hand. I will not let fear dictate my heart. That night, the desert wind carried both whispers of hope and the shadow of greed, a reminder that adventure and peril often walked hand in hand. And as Jasmine looked up at the stars, she made a silent promise. She would face whatever darkness came, for freedom, love, and truth were worth any risk. Jasmine's hand found his, and together they walked under the moonlight, feeling the tension tighten like a coil around the kingdom. Yet, even in the presence of looming danger, a spark of courage glimmered within her. Then let them watch, she whispered, tightening her grip on his hand. I will not let fear dictate my heart. That night, the desert wind carried both whispers of hope and the shadow of greed, a reminder that adventure and peril often walked hand in hand. And as Jasmine looked up at the stars, she made a silent promise. She would face whatever darkness came, for freedom, love, and truth were worth any risk. The night air was thick with anticipation as Jasmine and the traveler moved quietly through the palace corridors. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist, a reminder that the vizier's eyes could be anywhere. Hurry, we mustn't be seen, Jasmine murmured, her heart pounding like a drum in the stillness. The traveler led her to a hidden passage beneath the garden's rose arch, where moonlight barely touched the ancient stones. The path was narrow, winding, and lined with the scent of jasmine and secrets. I never knew this existed, Jasmine whispered, awe mingling with fear. You do, he replied softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. It's our little secret, at least for tonight. They reached the garden gates and paused. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, silvered by moonlight. The dunes looked both inviting and treacherous, and the wind whispered warnings in their ears. Once we step beyond this gate, there's no turning back, the traveler said, his eyes scanning the horizon. Jasmine's fingers trembled, but she drew a deep breath, feeling the power of her own courage rise like the desert sun. Then let us be free, she murmured, determination sparkling in her eyes. Hand in hand, they slipped through the gate, moving swiftly across the sand. The wind tugged at their robes, the stars overhead guiding their way. The distant palace lights faded behind them, replaced by the silver glow of the desert. Jasmine felt exhilaration like never before. The world, it's bigger than I ever imagined, she whispered, her hair catching the moonlight like a golden river. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the dunes, a scout sent by the vizier. The traveler pulled her behind a sand dune, and they crouched, holding their breaths as the figure passed. "Close call," he murmured, his voice low but steady. Jasmine's heart raced, but a laugh bubbled from her lips, a soft, relieved. And he joined her in the quiet laughter. It was a sound of freedom, fragile yet unbreakable. Together, they continued their journey under the stars, the desert night wrapping them in its silent embrace. Every step was a risk, every heartbeat a promise. They were fleeing not just from the vizier, but toward a life of adventure, love, and the boundless freedom Jasmine had always dreamed of. This is only the beginning," she murmured, and the desert seemed to echo her words, carrying them across the dunes. The desert stretched endlessly before them, waves of golden sand rippling under the moonlight. Jasmine and the traveler moved carefully, their footsteps leaving faint traces that the wind hurried to erase. "I never knew the desert could feel so alive," Jasmine murmured, her voice tinged with awe and nervous excitement. The traveler glanced at her, a gentle smile warming his features. "Every grain tells a story, Desert Rose. But tonight, the truth waits for us beyond these dunes." They climbed a high ridge, where the sand fell like liquid gold beneath the stars. From there, the world below seemed small, distant, yet the danger felt closer than ever. The vizier's men could appear at any moment, their greed as relentless as the desert winds. "We must be careful," he warned softly, scanning the horizon. Suddenly, a distant shimmer caught Jasmine's eye. A caravan moving across the dunes, guided by lanterns glowing faintly in the night. Her heart leapt. "Are they friend or foe?" she whispered, her grip tightening on his hand. The traveler chuckled softly, brushing a stray hair from her face. "We'll find out." But sometimes the truth only reveals itself when you take the leap. They descended the ridge, the sand cool beneath their bare feet, the night air carrying secrets of the desert. Along the way, Jasmine felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Fear of the unknown and the thrill of walking a path she had only dreamed of. "I've never felt more alive," she murmured, glancing up at him. He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "And that feeling is the beginning of freedom." As they neared the caravan, they discovered that it was not enemies but a group of desert nomads, wise and kind, who had heard of the princess's courage and were ready to help her. Their leader, an elder with eyes like polished amber, welcomed them with a warm smile. "You've come far," he said gently. "The desert tests all who seek truth, but it also rewards the brave." Jasmine felt a wave of relief and wonder wash over her. She realized that courage wasn't just about running from danger. It was about facing it, step by step, with trust and hope guiding her. "I can do this. I will find freedom, no matter the cost," she murmured, her heart steady with newfound determination. Under the vast, starry sky, Jasmine and the traveler joined the nomads, their journey through the desert now guided not only by fear or escape, but by the truth that courage, trust, and love would always light their path. The first light of dawn stretched across the desert, painting the dunes in soft gold and rose. Jasmine and the traveler stood atop a ridge, the palace visible far in the distance, its towers bathed in the gentle morning glow. "The palace. It feels smaller from here," Jasmine murmured, a mixture of hope and resolve in her voice. "I'm ready," she whispered, her golden hair catching the sunlight like a river of fire. Inside the palace, the vizier waited, his dark eyes narrowing as he saw them approach. "So, the little princess dares to return," he hissed. Jasmine stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Your shadows cannot bind me any longer. The kingdom belongs to its people, not to greed." The traveler moved beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We are not afraid of darkness," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering support. A tense moment hung in the air as the vizier raised his hand, summoning a swirl of dark magic. But Jasmine remembered the desert, the stars, the whispers of hope, and the courage that had carried her across dunes and danger. "I believe in freedom," she murmured, closing her eyes. Light erupted from her heart, golden and warm, chasing away the shadows that had haunted the palace. The vizier stumbled back, his power dissolving under the force of truth and courage. The people of the kingdom emerged from their homes, drawn by the magic and the light. They surrounded Jasmine, their cheers mingling with the morning breeze. The vizier, defeated and powerless, could only retreat into the shadows from which he came. Jasmine looked at the traveler, her heart full. "It's over. The kingdom is free." He smiled, brushing a stray hair from her face. "And so begins a new day, for you, for me, and for everyone who dares to dream." As the sun rose higher, its rays danced across the palace and the desert beyond. Jasmine knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that courage, hope, and love would guide her steps. "This is the life I've always imagined, and so much more." The kingdom awoke to a morning unlike any other. Golden light spilled across the desert, painting the dunes in shades of fire and rose. The air felt lighter, as though the heavy shadow of greed had finally lifted. Jasmine stood on the palace balcony, the cool breeze carrying the laughter of children and the music of merchants returning to the marketplace. Her heart swelled with pride and peace. "This is what freedom feels like," she murmured, closing her eyes to breathe it all in. The traveler appeared beside her, his presence as steady as the rising sun. He looked at her with warmth in his eyes, a gentle smile on his lips. "You've changed this kingdom, Jasmine. You've shown them what courage and love can do." She turned toward him, her eyes shimmering like starlight. "I didn't do it alone. You were with me, through every step." He laughed softly, the sound like music in the quiet morning. "And I will be, always." The people below began to cheer her name. "Desert Rose! Desert Rose!" their voices rising like a song carried on the desert wind. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of joy. "They see me, not as a princess in a cage, but as one of them." The traveler reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. Together they stepped forward, gazing at the kingdom that stretched endlessly before them, golden sands, starlit nights, and a future waiting to be written. "This is only the beginning," Jasmine whispered, her heart steady and strong. And as the sun climbed higher into the sky, its light bathed the palace and the desert beyond, promising a future filled with love, freedom, and endless adventure. The desert rose had bloomed, and the world would forever remember her story. And so, dear dreamers, as Jasmine's story comes to rest beneath the desert stars, may your heart feel as light as the morning breeze. Close your eyes, breathe gently, and let the whispers of the night carry you to dreams as magical as the desert rose herself. Good night, and may tomorrow's dawn bring you peace, hope,